Hi, everyone. Good evening and hi from wherever you're tuning in from. Please feel free to tell me where you're tuning in from in the chat. Um, and in a little bit, once we have a couple more people tuning in, we'll start talking for and about Trans Day of Visibility. All right. So, good evening, everyone. For those who don't know me and from wherever you're tuning in from, my name is Reverend Bryan. I use they and he pronouns. I am the head of the Order of the Rainbow Tent. I am a first degree clergy member of the Karelian Nativist tradition. I am an out trans man, and I live in New York City. And during the day, I am an advocate for LGBTQ plus elders in my day job. And, well, in the evenings, I also advocate for LGBTQ plus rights across New York City, New York State, and across the United States. So, Monday, which is March 31st, is Trans Day of Remembrance. Transgender Day of Remembrance, Transgender Day of Visibility is March 31st. Transgender Day of Remembrance is November 21st. So for Trans Day of Visibility, we are being visible. We are celebrating and bringing trans joy and advocating and raising awareness around the lives of transgender people. And then in November is when we remember our trans siblings who have been stolen from us from violence. Um, Transgender Day of Visibility was started in 2009, so actually quite recently, by a trans advocate named Rachel Cradnell Crocker in Michigan. So, for those who don't know, obviously, right now, it's very important that we continue to talk about what it's like to be visible as trans people, but also what brings us joy. Um, and a big part of what brings me joy is holding space for trans and non binary people, but also giving our allies a place to learn and ask questions. However, please be mindful of if you're going to ask me questions this evening. Please don't make them too personal. I am not going to talk about any surgeries I've had. I am not going to talk about any personal things like that. Um, just because right now it is very dangerous for a trans community. But I am happy to take any questions in the chat. So like I said, throughout history, trans people have existed. Um, from people of indigenous background like myself who are two spirit. There are the Haradra of South Asia, the Gili of Sabili. So we are not new. We go by different names. There has never been only two genders. There has always been many genders, many gender expressions, many ways to express your gender. Um, and expressing, how you want the world to perceive you and how the world should perceive you and how the world should respect you and how you want to be respected by society. Um, Everybody's journey is different. My journey started when I was 20. However, I will say that throughout my life, there were probably instances where it probably was not a surprise to people in my life that I am a man who was not living as a man. I've always been very masculine, very stereotypical dude like, but that's just me. Um, so yeah, I did not I did not conform into the world the way I should have. However, I will say that living as myself, growing a beard, uh, being on testosterone has definitely changed the trajectory of my life in the sense that I feel safer in my body, in my head, and in my spirit masculinely than I did before. Um, Hello, Jade. Nice to see you. Thanks for joining. But yeah, I just wanted to say that, that is probably the most important thing. Um, and everyone's story is different. Everybody's transformation, everybody's journey to self discovery is different. And it's not just trans people and non binary people. That can be said for cis people. Um, the example that I like to give about, you know, living authentically is piercings and tattoos these days. If you want to get pierced and tattooed, go get pierced and tattooed. No one should tell you how to live your life as long as you're an adult. And even with youth, hello, Elvis. Hi, Kitty. How are you? Want to say hello to your fans? Yeah, you want to say hi? Elvis gets misgendered all the time. She knows what it's like. Um, as long as you are expressing your gender in a way that is safe and comfortable and, even social transition, people go by nicknames, people use, you know, shorthands of their names. That to me is joy. Um, I have a friend who their entire life they used an abbreviation of their name. I've never known them by anything else, so that's kind of unique in that sense, and that is who they are to me. It's the same thing, but visibility and joy is all perspective. Hey, kitty. So that's something that I find very fulfilling. Um, Please feel free to put things in the question in the chat to help guide this conversation along. So I'm just not talking on a whim here. Um, but also celebrating ourselves is important. Celebrating our resiliency. Making sure that we are building community in the way that we want to. That's important. Um, it's also our visibility is also what gives hope to younger generations, to the next generation of activists. It's kind of an icebreaker question. Um, but what is one role model do you wish everyone knew about? Well, I am I am not the traditional celebrity or um like I don't have like weird I don't fanboy easy. So I'm going to say and you can look her up. She's a local activist here in New York City. She's a district leader. She's ran for assembly. Her name's Melissa Scolares. And she's a very interesting story that of her life. You know, she's considerably older than me. So coming out was different for her. Um, but yeah, I think someone like that, or you know, I find I find role models for trans masculine people can be a little hard for me, um, because of a couple of things for me personally. Um, I am 4 feet 10 inches tall. I am of a bit of a bigger build. I've lost about 80 pounds over the past year, so I am slimming down. But I find it hard in trans masculine community to find role models because it's so hyper fixated on like body and muscle and being appealing. I'm also not straight. I am bisexual. I am in a same gender um I am in a same gender presenting marriage. So we appear as two gay guys. So there's also that. Um Today is Joan of Arc's day. However, we're talking about Transgender Day of Visibility, which is actually Monday, but I'm having this conversation today because I have a long work day on Monday because it's Trans Day of Visibility. But yeah, so when it comes to role models, I am a very different kind of person. I take my role models to be more in my hemisphere of activism. Um, but yeah, someone said good night to you, Elvis. She said, I'm not sleepy. I'm here. Just down here. She's just here to give support, like most kitties. Um, However, I am lucky in the sense that I have been able in my life here in New York City to make some unconventional friends. Usually cis guys, but cis straight guys who have wanted to learn more about trans people as just everyday people. And that has helped for me. So they're not role models per se, but I have had the honor of being that role model or that person to teach someone about just that trans people want to be like everyone else. I want to get up in the morning. I want to drink my coffee. I either want to go to the gym or go to work. And then I want to come home. That's my life these days. I'm at a point in my life where I don't need to be out all the time. I don't really want to, but I just want to live my life in a very quiet manner. I want to travel. I want to be allowed to travel and not be judged or told where I can and can't go. Um, that's something I've worked really hard for. And sometimes visibility isn't this. Visibility is sort of assimilation, in my opinion. Um, I am okay with that. Everybody's version of visibility is different. Um, that's just mine. I go through I've gone through phases of it where I wish I was more visible or was recognized more or seen more for the work I do. But I'm at a point in my life where that matters less. That's something you go through that's also really hard in community. I've found over the past years is we only make up about 1% of the population, and we're being baited and used in a way that there aren't enough of us to actually care about us in the way that's harmful. So, but I will say that for me, I have found that there is no choice. There's no like going back for me. There is no changing of course or going backwards. So, here's that. Elvis, you have anything you want to say? No? Um, let's see. Does anybody else have any questions? Questions would be extremely helpful. did have a couple more notes, so let's use those. I would say that if you're watching this and you are not transgender or non binary yourself, that this is probably the most pivotal time for you to speak up and speak out for us, to advocate for us, to stand up for us, to defend us, because the people that want to do us harm would want you to say, "Oh, I feel safer because you did this." No, you should be saying, "I feel safer because trans people want to live their lives, and so do I." Um, you know, I want to be able to go to the grocery store. I want to be able to pay my mortgage. I want to be able, to do all of those things, and so does everyone else. So, visibility for me is other people standing up and recognizing that there is no difference between me and them. Um, and that, you know, it's important for all of us to live together and just go about the world. I will say that also, there is not always going to be a great time for people to be out and visible. It's always going to come with struggle, but the biggest thing that I have found that is helpful is just being the best version of yourself every day. That is probably the best thing you could do. And I'm going to keep this really short tonight. So, unless you have any questions and you've been holding them because you like hearing what I have to say, please don't hold them. Probably stay on for another 5 minutes. So, if you have a question, feel free to drop it in the chat wherever you're watching. I'm going to pull up some resources and I'm going to drop them in the ticker. We know that their ideology is fear. However, that is alone is the problem. So people need to be able to actually say that they're not afraid, because we don't we unfortunately for too long have said nothing. And that is probably, to me, been the biggest problem, is that people didn't say anything enough for the longest time. And that is something that I have dealt with for years. Um, and while I appreciate that there are people who have transitioned and been doing the work longer than me, I will say that when I came out in 2012, that the number of trans masculine people that were visible here in New York was not a lot. And it still believe it or not a lot. Especially those of us between, I would say, 30 and 45. There is a large portion of transmasculine people who went stealth out of fear, stigma, and lack of what I would call love from our community. And it's something that I've gone through, I've dealt with a lot. Um, it is something that I have experienced a lot, unfortunately, of people not understanding transmasculine people, not understanding when you are socialized female, especially when I was growing up. There wasn't this large movement for girls could do whatever they want, that you know, there wasn't that at the time. There was still a lot of a lack of that empowerment. So to go from that to being a transgender man also came with a level of you can't talk right now. You can't there's a lot of that. I did mention that a little bit earlier, Magical Mermaid, about the 1% of the population. Um, Unfortunately, you know, they're doing it now, so there's not much we can do. Um, we can't really go backwards; we can only go forwards. But for me, it has been a struggle a lot, um, because there isn't enough representation. Um, I Yeah, it's so visibility is, when we're talking about trans day visibility, what often happens and something that we deal with a lot is the same people being visible. This week alone, I was at 3 different events with at least the same 3 people, which is fine. Um, but hi, Kayleen from Australia. So it's about morning time ish by you. So good morning. Coffee time for you. Almost bedtime for me. So yeah, it's not it's a struggle. And now that there's been all of this negative, oh, afternoon time. And now that there's all this negative stuff out there, it's even harder. Um, but we're gonna focus on the joy for today. Um, will say that in the past couple weeks, it has been both a struggle to yeah, a lot of people don't understand Caitlyn Jenner. I will say that one thing that I've tried to express to people is that transgender people, much like any other group of people, we are not all one same plane of thinking people. Um, we are not all the same. Um, we don't have the same values or upbringing. We all have come from the same lived experience even before we transition. So I try not to I try not to talk ill of other trans people regardless of any potential or unpotential harms they have caused, but sometimes it is best to, and this is why it's taking me a little while to get my thoughts out, to think before you speak. Um, because, you know, what I say is one thing, what another trans person says could be something else. So I just try to let people come up with their own opinions. And as long as you're living life in a way that is, you know, helpful for you and you're not hurting anyone else, then that's fine with me. Except when you do harm someone else, that's a problem. Um, Kaylin also said, just past midday, I helped establish Transgender Victoria in the late 90s, and that we've been fortunate to have good changes of people over the years. And then Magical Mermaid says, we're definitely at the bottom of the DEI food chain. We shall survive. Yeah, I feel that. And that is why I'm very happy and very lucky that I get to do the work that I do during the day, Monday through Friday, advocating for our elders of the LGBTQ plus community, where there is also um, a growing amount of trans people, thankfully, that are growing old, which is a good thing. Gives me hope for the future. Um, I will say that the thing that has made this, and going back to what Magical Mermaid said, that for too long we have tried to take the high road and not over talk about ourselves, because like you said, we're only just 1% of the population. That ignoring us to some people sounds like a good idea, because we don't want to be treated differently. We want to be treated equitably. um but when you don't say anything, then the bad stuff becomes so much larger. And Kaylin also says, very true and important about us all being different people. The concept of trans joy is a great concept, one I only came across in recent years, and one that is difficult to realize for me. Yeah, I struggle with trans joy. I struggle with, I mean, like, positive self-talk. Um Especially when you're in community, or when you're in events that are trans centered, it's hard to not like be comparing yourself in your journey to another person, or you know from the trans masculine experience, when guys are further along in their journey or have gotten to another stage, or that guy's super jacked, I'm not, like, that's the struggle. I know it's something that also cis people deal with, but when you're trying to be taken seriously as a trans person in a cisgender world, those criticisms become a little harder on yourself. Sorry, I had to take a drink of water because I'm doing all this talking. Um, but I would say that, you know, trans joy, I don't think it's something you have to, like, it's like gratitude, or like meditation, or positive words of affirmation. Like, you have to practice it every day. You have to be able to, like, wake up, or in whatever part of your routine it is, be able to acknowledge, like, being trans is something to feel joy about, and here's one thing I feel trans joy about today. It could literally be my pants fit. Like, today, it was the first really nice day here in New York City. It got to like 80 degrees, and I got to put on this new pair of shorts that I bought. They are really still, I probably should have gotten them a size or two smaller, but I'm still learning how to appreciate that my waist has shrunk. So anyway, the point is that, trans joy for me today was walking around the streets of the West Village in shorts and a white tank top. I have been working on my fitness journey for since the new year, but it started last year. And I got to just, be out amongst other, what I would perceive mostly cisgender people, even though the West Village is known to be predominantly LGBT. Um, so, I was out, my arms were on display. I bumped into some um elected officials here in New York City on my way around, and it was funny because usually when I see them, I'm in a dress shirt, tie, blazer, and there I was just in a tank top and shorts walking around. So trans joy for me was just you know having my biceps and my arms out, which are considerably growing, in a way that was like affirming to me because it was nice out and I could. Um, but I will say that also, resilience and you know that part of being visible is this, right? Sharing to what degree you're comfortable with what is possibly complete strangers, mostly, and being vulnerable. And thankfully I live in America where for at least right now I have freedom of speech. um that might not be said tomorrow, but who knows. And I have the freedom of expression. This is me expressing myself. You know I am a transgender man. I like my beard, period. You're gonna have to buzz it off my face. Yes, Elvis? What? For those who don't know, I have a kitty named Elvis. She does use she, her pronouns. She is a girl. Yeah. She's sitting next to me. She doesn't want to be seen, but she's here. Um, are there any more questions or comments or anything you want me to touch on? I'll give it a couple more minutes. And then I'll close out with the remarks that I had prepared to close out with. Um, but I'm happy to stay on if there are questions or anything else anybody wants me to talk about, to which I'm comfortable. Nice kitty. Good kitty. Yes, Anissa, I'm well aware about what's going on in Texas. Unfortunately, or fortunately, my husband is from Texas. My in laws live there. So there is a different degree of conversations that we are having. Oh, hi, Miss Kim. Thanks for tuning in. This is something I'm doing outside of the norm. So thanks for stopping by. Um, but Anissa says, unfortunately, Houston, Texas lacks secular government services. Also, government services like Houston, like shelter, are not sensitive to yeah. So that's something we're seeing a lot of in across the country. I'm lucky that I live here in New York. I am lucky that I get to have that ability. However, I did marry someone whose family lives in Texas, so and moving about the country is going to be like that. It's sad where we are, but yeah, Magical Mermaid, that's something that we talked about in an event that I was in during the week. We're lucky here in the United States that we have one like US senator who is trans, and then smaller across the state, across the country, there have been council members and varying degrees of elected officials across who have held smaller positions. Um in New York City, we have had trans people attempt to run unsuccessfully. But that's a broader conversation that needs to be had. And then also, one thing that I experienced doing the work that I do is that to run for office, you need to have money, right? You need to be able to fundraise. You need to be able to take time out of your job to run for office, at least here in New York City. It's really hard to do both at the same time. So trans people need to be given the ability to have good jobs, to make a savings, to, create a nest egg so that being an elected official, which is an act of community service, even though you're elected by the people and you work for the people, in order to get to that spot, you have to essentially give up what I would consider at least 18 months of your life to run for office. So that that is something that, is always in my mind. Um it's something that I am always considering. I have considered a number of times, and it never shook out the way I wanted it to, but for me there are always possibilities of that in the future. Um but I will say that, you know, especially now during these times, what's going on in this country, at least in America, we have to do better at our balance as trans people. I find myself sometimes struggling between what I want to do for community and me taking care of myself. Um, there are people watching this that know that I have struggled with. I am a person of service at heart. This conversation tonight is my act of service to my community, holding space, giving space, creating space. But sometimes it's really hard for me in this moment when the world is going against the community and for me to take that step back and be selfish and take what I need. So I think that's why also, at least for me, the thought of running for office has sort of taken a backseat until some things settle out and I can be a little more giving. Kaylin says we've got a pride group that are trying to encourage more LGBTQISB plus. S is sister gal, B is brother boy people to run, but it is a big commitment. I had years of burnout in the early 2000s. Yeah, so exactly that. There is a lot of burnout, and there is a lot of guilt around when you feel burnt out and pulling back. Um, so definitely some of that. So one thing I want, if you can, wherever you're watching, whatever stream you're watching this on, if you're watching this, I'd love for you to put in the chat if you want to, or write it down to yourself. Um, Something about the trans community or yourself, or if you're trans, or someone that's trans, that you find inspiring or that brings you joy for them or yourself. And I'd love to see it if you want. If not, write it down, put it away. And in the next couple weeks, tonight is the new moon. So in a couple weeks, when we have the full moon, I'd love for you to take that out, and reflect on it and use it as part of your full moon ritual if that is your thing. So, yeah. And I just want to take a moment to thank everyone for hanging out with me for the past 40 minutes. Like I said, my name is Reverend Bryan. I use they and he pronouns. I am the head of the Order of the Rainbow Tent for the Karealian Nativist tradition. I'm an open trans man. I am bi. I am pagan. It's very rare that I mix publicly my activism and my clergyship together. But yeah, thank you so much for being here. So Lewis said, my sister Kim Watson, all of her work that she does. I would agree, Lewis. I have known Kim Watson for a very long time. She is truly inspiring. She is given a lot to our community here in New York City. She's been a great resource to me and to so many others. So definitely that. Kayleen said Julia Peters here is a very inspiring advocate from the 90s. Magical Mermaid says, I love that we can be fiercely authentic. Um, and Kayleen, I believe in her native language, said thank you for this. So thank you all for joining me. I appreciate each and every one of you for spending time with me, for talking about Transgender Day of Visibility, for talking about our community, for hearing me ramble about what it's like to be an open, trans, indigenous, pagan who does community work. I am often wearing many, many hats in many spaces because I have found that oftentimes I'm the only person in the room talking from certain spaces, whether it's religion or being transmasculine or from other lived experiences. So to have you all here listening to me talk means a lot. For you all to be sharing so openly and honestly means a lot to me. I want to quickly say thank you to Reverend Mary Hawk for giving me the platform to do this on. I want to say thank you to the First Priesthood, to Reverend Phoenix, and to Lord Phoenix and Lady Alyssa for always supporting me and for giving me the platform to do the things that I'm passionate about. And yeah, I just want to say that. And thank you so much and have a great rest of your night. Blessed be, everyone.